and welcome to the Ruth MacFit Podcast, where we're redefining what it means to feel great in midlife. My name is Ruth, and I am coach and creator of the No Crap Cake Method, a simple, no-nonsense approach to fat loss, fitness, and feeling your best without giving up everything you love. A quick note here as well, we have started our No Crap Summer Challenge. It's all about building those habits that feel sustainable, that can actually keep you going over the summer. No extremes, just flexible routines that fit with your life. Because summer is busy and at some points you'll be able to focus on more than others. And right now you can get 20% off your first month of membership. To join, you can find all of the information in the show notes. And of course, I'd absolutely love to have you with us. So if you're ready to ditch your all or nothing mindset, feel stronger in your 40s and beyond, and say no to all the crap that drains you, then you are absolutely in the right place. Let's go. Hello, welcome back. Very, very happy to be here with you today, as always. Now, those of you that have listened for a while will probably have heard me chat about my brunch runs, my Saturday run, where I run into my local town with headphones on, listening to an audiobook. I meet my husband for coffee or brunch, and I chat about everything I've listened to on the way in and so on. And when I'm running, I'm often reflecting, I'm often thinking. It's where I get a lot of the ideas for my podcast episodes and my social media content. And it was on one of those runs that I actually was thinking about this episode, because what I want to talk to you about today is actually something that I find really quite comforting, I guess, and empowering. And that is the idea that we are still changing. We're not a finished product. Because when I was on that run, I thought, gosh, if I look back, and I mean really look back, I'm amazed at how different I am. Like if you'd met me 20 years ago or early 2000s, let's say early 2000s, you probably would have found me at a bar in Polzeath with one of those disgusting orange Reef drinks in hand. Ooh, I don't know if you remember them, like passion fruit flavour, so sweet. Anyway, probably would have been drinking one of those, looking out at this beautiful sea view, thinking that my life was pretty sweet. I would have been at uni during the week, and I would have been pulling regular all-nighters, trying to finish assignments that were due in the following day, which actually makes me feel a little bit nauseous to think about that now. But if you'd met me then, you likely never would have imagined that one day I'd be someone who would be choosing to go for a run and have a coffee instead of that night out and a hangover, or that I'd have a favourite mantra, or journal every evening and listen to non-fiction books about mindset, health and behavioural change for fun. I know. Who even is she? Because back then, I wouldn't have believed I'd even want to live like this, let alone enjoy it. My goals were very short term, get assignment done and in. What is my weekend going to be like? It wasn't how I wanted to feel 10 years down the line. And I thought that people who planned their meals and meditated, journaled, they were probably pretty boring or had too much time on their hands, or old, maybe. Maybe I'd have viewed those people as being old. But it's also worth adding, I was pretty young then, and I only had myself to think about. I didn't have to think about a husband and kids, a house that I was looking after. So life was very, very different. And of course, my approach to life was going to be different. When I approached a health and fitness goal, for example, and I'm going to say that this wasn't in my early 20s, this would have been in my late 20s, early 30s even, I would have believed that if it worked for 6 weeks, then that meant it worked. I wouldn't think about how sustainable it was. I was just focused on doing what I needed to do for that period of time and finishing it. And if you'd asked me even 5 years ago, do you think you've changed over the last 5 years? I'd have said, yeah, absolutely. And likely told you about how my approach to health, business, family life, even how I'm chatting to myself, how that had all changed. How I was so much braver with making big decisions like moving abroad for a year or having young workaways coming to live with us, which are things I never thought I'd have been someone who would do that. But then if you'd said to me, cool, Ruth, that's great. How much do you think you're going to change in the next 5 years? I probably would have said not much at all. And that right there, my friends, is what psychologists call the end of history illusion. And it basically means we're pretty good at recognizing how much we've changed in the past, but we massively underestimate how much we'll continue to change in the future. We know we're not the same person that we were 10 years ago, but we act like the version we are now is the finished product, the final edit. Nothing's going to change here. Thanks very much. And spoiler alert, it's not. We're not done. We've not finished changing, which I think is really great. It's really good news, because if you're feeling stuck or overwhelmed or like your habits are set in stone, it's great to know that we're not trapped. You're not stuck as a person who always gives up or always overeats on holiday or never exercises. You're just in the middle of the story. We're in midlife, so we are in the middle. And I remember a time not even that long ago when I thought I'd never want to give up alcohol or never want to even consider drinking less. It was such a strong part of how I socialised. And I think I thought I needed it to relax or have fun. And now I do occasionally drink, but it's not very often at all. And it wasn't because I felt like I needed to give up, because I wasn't somebody that was getting drunk regularly. It was because the negatives that came from drinking seemed to be mounting up, and the benefits that came from drinking seemed to be getting less. And I also think that journaling's another one that I can mention here, because for years I thought that I wasn't someone who would ever journal. It was a bit woo-woo or just for people that had loads of time on their hands. And now you'll find me scribbling a few lines before bed every single night. Yes. In fact, I talk about 2014 being this big catalyst for change, this big turning point for me when I got really ill. And it was a really hard year. And it was a hard year after that because I had that bed rest. I was really poorly. I had to change a lot of my approach to things because it had led to me being ill. And I learned a lot then. It also took me down the route of strength training more and so on. But I also think that there was another turning point for me that wasn't that long ago. Just what we're thinking. 3 years ago, maybe? I'd just moved back from Barbados, where I'd been living for a year. I think I was grieving the life I had there. We talked about moving abroad again, and I wasn't sure what we should be doing or where we should be living or what the right decision to make was. And I was almost paralysed by indecision. I don't know if anyone else can relate to that. I also had been going to the doctors because I had a high hormone level, a hormone called prolactin, which is actually a stress hormone, but it can also be linked to your pituitary gland. And because it had been high in the past and it had gone up again, they wanted to get that checked out with an MRI and so on. I'd also gained a little bit of weight and I just really wasn't feeling like myself. And I remember there was a point where that Taylor Swift song, now I'm not a Taylor Swift fan, I'm sorry, but I remember the song, it's me, I'm the problem, it's me, that one. And I thought, what if I'm the problem? What if it's me? And I wasn't being harsh on myself. I just had a bit of a reality check that it's very easy for me to look at my hormone level and say, I've got nothing to do with this. But actually, I realised I'd been putting a huge amount of pressure on myself. So I decided to take the pressure off and accept who I was, start practicing gratitude, focus on what would make me feel calmer, make some decisions so that I felt good about those, because any decision feels better than not making a decision. And the only reason I'm sharing this is because even now, even a few years later, I'm not the same person as I was even a few years ago. And my 40s are genuinely my favourite decade to date. But the change happened with just small habits, small routine changes that built up over time. A bit like the compounding I spoke about in my previous podcast episode. And honestly, telling you the story of all the things I've changed, little by little, would be a whole episode on its own. Maybe I'll do that one day. So why does the illusion matter for us in midlife? It's so easy, isn't it, to fall into that trap of thinking, this is it. That how you eat now is how you're always going to eat. That how you feel in your body is how you're always going to feel. That it's something you just have to put up with. That it's too late to start again. But it really isn't. You're still changing. And in fact, one of the most exciting things that I get to see or get to witness inside the No Crap Cake method is women realising that the future version of themselves isn't fixed. That the things that they're doing now are leading them towards a better future. It's so easy to just give up on fat loss, but it's not easy to give up on the things that make you feel good. And our habits do shape who we are, but I also want you to remember that our identity shape our habits too. And this is where it's important that we give ourselves permission to change without shame, without pressure. And then we can start building that life that actually suits who we are now. There's that phrase, isn't there? What you pitch is what you get. And if we're constantly telling ourselves that we're the person that always gives up, or we're the person that always overeats, and we're repeating that again and again, then that is what will happen. What is it? Where the attention goes, your energy flows. Oh, full of all the mantras today. So it's really important that we give ourselves permission, that we think about why we want these changes. And I know the book Manifest by Roxy Nafusu, I feel like she is called. I know she says fake it until you become it, because sometimes those little things that we tell ourselves can be that we're stuck in the past, like I've always been somebody that struggled with exercise. But instead we can say, I'm someone who always feels better for moving my body. And actually, I had this with a client recently. She had said to me that she was struggling to make movement a priority, and she didn't know why she was struggling with it so much, and she just needed to make herself do it and so on. And I made a comment to her saying, instead of being someone that struggles with moving, what about if you're somebody that can say to yourself, I always feel better for moving my body? And I noticed in a check-in that she did just today, actually, she said, I've noticed that moving more is giving me more energy. Now, that is true. That happens. That is a truth of moving more. It could become a cycle. But also, by saying that, by writing it down, she's reinforcing it. And that's what I love, because that sort of identity is going to make health, fat loss, fitness, and even the way we see ourselves easier. It's going to shape that. Right, now that we know that we're not finished products, and we will keep changing, of course, let's talk about something that quietly keeps women stuck, and that is the sunk cost fallacy. Now, you will have likely have heard me talk about it with regards to cake, and we can say the no crap cake method is helping us with this massively. So let's say you bought a cake, you start to eat the cake, it tastes like crap, but you spent that money on it. So it might be that in the past, you would have eaten the cake because it would seem like a waste of money. But that's you aligning, your kind of logic with your past decision. It's no longer working for you because it tastes like crap. You'd rather have something else that's better later. You're not able to change the fact that you've spent that money. And that is part of the sunk cost fallacy. But I also see the sunk cost fallacy with women who are chasing a goal weight that they had in their 20s, or still think that they should run because they used to run, or they're pushing to fit into a certain size jean because they've already bought them and they used to fit, so they should fit again. But what if that version of you that wanted those things, wanted those goals, isn't the version of you now? What if that number or that outfit or that pace or that dress size actually doesn't mean what it used to mean to you? You might have evolved, your priorities might have shifted, your life is likely going to be busier now than it was when you maybe set those goals. And sometimes we're so focused on not giving up that we don't pause and ask ourselves if we actually still want it. You might still have a fat loss goal, and I'm totally for that. But the reason for it may well have changed. It might be a different reason than it used to be. And from my experience, by this stage of life, it's normally about more than fat loss too, right? I know that women who come to me, they'll come to me and they'll be fed up with dieting. They have been on and off a diet for years, since their 20s perhaps. And this time they want it to be different. I know I said it earlier, but when I was in my late 20s, early 30s, if I did something for 6 weeks and it worked, then it worked. But by the time you've got to your 40s and 50s and beyond, you've done that so many times that you're pretty fed up with it by now. And that's one thing that we don't really want anymore. And we dread the idea of going on yet another diet. I've actually got a lovely member of the No Crap Cake method. And in every check-in, she writes the same goal, that she wants to lose weight in a calm way. And it's such a beautiful intention. I love it. I'll never get bored of reading it. Because for her, it's not just about weight. It's not some goal that she's clinging to because she wants to fit into a certain size for a holiday or to prove something. She wants to feel good in her body, but not at the cost of her peace. And she's so focused and consistent. And honestly, she's absolutely smashing it. And it's not just because she's losing weight, although she is, but because she's doing it her way, the way that suits her now, that fits with her life. And fat loss is so much easier when you feel calmer. And it's so much harder to give up on things that actually make you feel good. So maybe it's worth asking yourself, am I holding on to a goal because I've already put so much effort into it, or because I still truly want it where I am now? with the knowledge I have now, with the values and the priorities I have now, fat loss can absolutely still be part of the picture. And I want to be clear on that. But it doesn't have to look the way that it used to. And you don't owe the 2015 version of yourself anything. She got you here. Well done. But it's okay to want something different now. Now, this next part, it could ruffle a few feathers, but not in a bad way, just in a real life sort of way. Because even when we're ready for change, when we've outgrown certain habits and behaviours, beliefs, sometimes the people around us haven't quite caught on yet. They still see this version of you that they've always known. I know family can be guilty of this. And often without meaning to, they try to keep you there. And I think we all know how it goes. You'll hear them say, oh, go on, have another glass, or do you love this wine? Or, oh, you've changed. And then a don't be boring comment maybe just dropped into the mix, or a favourite of mine, are you on another diet? I don't think it's often meant with malice. I think that sometimes people are just trying to keep things familiar. They're used to a version of you that they've seen before, the one that always said yes to the toast or the wine or the late night takeaway. And sometimes it can also be hard for those around us because it's like holding up a mirror to the things that they're not doing. And I think it's worth remembering that in that situation, it becomes more about them than you. And it doesn't need to cause any conflict. You don't necessarily need to say anything. It's just mentally knowing and acknowledging that they're saying this, not necessarily to make you feel bad, but to make themselves feel better. So when you start making different choices, ones that align with where you are now, your current self and so on, it can feel like you're disrupting that script for them. We were on a group coaching call recently as we were introducing the summer challenge, and one of the members was saying that she's heading away in the summer, and because of that she's probably going to have the toast and the cereal that everyone else is having in this shared accommodation because she doesn't want to be difficult. And the question I asked her, which I'll ask you if you're thinking the same, is what if it isn't about being difficult? What about if you just wanted something different? It doesn't need to be about being on a diet or making a fuss, but just choosing something that makes you feel good, makes you feel better. Like if you hated toast, really didn't like toast, I don't think anyone would bat an eyelid if you said no thank you. Somewhere along the way, we start believing that taking care of ourselves is an inconvenience to others. But we had another member on the call and she made an amazing point and said that when she's taken some other healthier options away on these sorts of trips, she's actually found that most people have wanted what she has and she's had to share it. And I think we often think we know what other people are thinking and what others want, but we really don't. Choosing something different doesn't have to be a big statement. You don't have to justify it. And you definitely don't need to apologise. You are allowed to change, even if those people around us aren't changing with us. And here's a little nugget for you that I picked up years ago that I used to use more often, but it's useful in situations where you feel a bit uncomfortable asking or saying something, even though you're really sure it's what you want. And this is that when you say that you would like that thing or you don't want that thing, say it as if you're asking someone to pass the salt. Calm, simple, without explanation. Like you wouldn't justify asking for someone to pass the salt, and you don't need to justify the choices you're making either. So get that one firmly implanted in your brain. Pass the salt. Next time you're saying, I'm not going to have the toast, thanks, say it like that. Not because I'm on a diet or because I'm trying to be good or any of those old things. You just don't want it. And obviously, if you did want the toast, you can have the toast. Sometimes the most powerful changes are the ones that we do quietly without telling anyone, just consistently, no drama. That definitely was the case for me. Maybe today it's going to be choosing the breakfast that makes you feel good. Maybe next week it's going to be going for a walk instead of defaulting to wine after a difficult day. Maybe it's finally saying that it doesn't work for me anymore and letting that be enough. Change doesn't have to be loud. It just has to feel like it's right for you. So I think it's time now that I brought this all together, because we've talked about how often we underestimate how much more we're going to change, even though we can clearly see how much we've changed in the past. And that is the end of history illusion doing its thing, tricking us into thinking that this is the finished product. This is the finished version of ourselves. We also talked about how we sometimes chase goals out of guilt because we've already invested so much time, money, energy in them. Even if they don't actually suit us anymore, they're not really what fit with our life anymore. And that is the sunk cost fallacy. And it can keep us stuck chasing this version of success that really doesn't apply anymore. You're definitely allowed to let go of a goal that no longer aligns with your current values or this time in life. And then we touched on that tricky one, how other people see us, how friends, partners, and family might still expect us to be the same person that we were 5 or 10 years ago. In fact, I was watching a program on TV and it was around Christmas time and it had the family sitting around and the sisters were being so mean to the brother. They were getting out the phone, like he's a grown man now. They were trying to record him, having a grump and so on. And they definitely weren't seeing him as anything but the little brother he'd been years ago. And I thought, actually, for family, we spent all of those years with them growing up, but we move out, we change, we adapt. And sometimes they don't really catch up with us because we don't see them all the time and they can still think we're that person. And that can feel really hard. It can make change feel a little awkward, even if it is exactly what we need. So here's what I want to leave you with. You don't have to stay the same to keep other people comfortable. You don't have to keep chasing goals that you no longer believe in. And you most definitely don't need to buy into that lie that midlife is some kind of finish line, because it's not. Like I said, my 40s so far have been my best decade yet. I am loving them. And if anything, I believe that this is the time of your life where things finally start to make sense, finally start to click, because we know so much more now. We've learned so much from the mistakes we've made in the past. And if you're like me, you'll have made plenty of mistakes in the past. It's not a bad thing at all. I think it's Seth Godin who says, those who fail most usually win. And that kind of goes back to that whole thing of there is no failure, only feedback. When we're making all those mistakes, as long as we're taking time to understand what's happened, we can learn from them. And that's brilliant. We can stop living life on autopilot and start asking, what do we want now? Not just what did I used to want? You've lived enough to know what doesn't work now. And you're still, this is brilliant, young enough to shape what's ahead. What an amazing position to be in. So powerful. So if you're listening and something started stirring, maybe just take a moment this week to ask yourself a question. I do love to ask you a question. What is one old habit that no longer serves you? And you don't need to overhaul your life. You don't need this big declaration. Just be curious. Take a step. Just think of it as a vote for who you want to become. You've already changed more than you might realize, and you're not done yet. And as always, thank you so much for being here with me today. If this podcast resonated with you, then please do leave a review, leave a comment, share with a friend, especially if you've had those sorts of conversations with them before. You know, the ones that say like, who even am I? Or who even was she? Like, what has happened? Or chatting about how life's changed after kids, or after burning out, or after turning 40. And if you do want some support with making changes that align with where you are now, then come and join us inside the No Crap Cake Method. We would love to have you. You can find the coaching options on www.ruthmacfit.com. You can also find me on Instagram at Ruth MacFit, and I am always happy to answer questions there. Anyway, go and enjoy the rest of your day, whatever it is you're doing, and I will look forward to speaking to you next time. Goodbye.